This is Jocko Podcast, number 47, with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
And I went a little long with a couple reviews. We've done some interviews. We interviewed JP Donnell, and I got a ton of really solid books that I'm reading. I'm learning a lot from all of them, and just getting a lot out of those books that I'm reading right now about war,
Sure.
and about leadership, and about human nature, and about life, but kind of failed to answer questions for the last few podcasts, questions from the interwebs, from everybody out there that's listening, and the questions have been piling up. So tonight we're going to simply dive into some questions from you all out there. So let's get right to it. Echo Charles.
Yes.
Question number one.
First
what
question.
do you got?
Jocko, do you think that most MMA fighters have what it takes to be SEALs? The mental and physical, the brutal weight cut, the brutal fight camp, and stepping into a cage with a trained and elite opponent?
Well, this is one of those questions where you might think there's like a really definitive answer, but there isn't really. Some MMA fighters could definitely be great SEALs, for sure. Some of them actually wouldn't stand a chance as SEALs. And there's a lot of things that make people quit and not want to be SEALs or quit during SEAL training. You know, you got the water. Some people don't like the water. Some people are uncomfortable in the water. Great athletes, not good in the water. Some people don't like the cold. And they can they can take all kinds of punishment of physical nature, but they don't like the cold. Some people don't like heights. And you get to the top of a 40 or 50 foot cargo net and you got to climb over that little pole at the top, get to the other side. Some people don't like that. Some people can't do some simple stuff like memorize. You can't memorize certain facts, and there is a intellectual level that you have to have. Some people aren't situationally aware, right? So some of these, like for instance, you know certain MMA fighters who are real wild, and it's one of their good characteristics is that they're kind of out of control. It helps them do wild things in a fight, unexpected things. You can't be like that in the kill house with going live fire, right? You can't have that. Why? You need to be able to suppress that. And some people can't suppress that. So what you'd end up with is someone that's going to have safety issues because they're too instinctual and they can't get those instincts under control. Some people might have too much endurance but not enough strength. Some people might have too much strength and not enough endurance. Some people are injury prone, right? Some people are just injury prone, and it's not their fault in many cases, but they are. And then you take, so that's sort of the things that it takes to be in the SEAL teams that could hold up or trip up somebody that's just a standard MMA fighter. Now, the same thing is true with SEALs that would be MMA fighters, right? Or could SEAL potentially be an MMA fighter? And there's been a few SEALs that have fought really well and good fighters and all that. But to make a blanket statement, there's going to be things that trip people up. And for instance, some guys in the SEAL teams, they're not the best athlete. Their athletic ability is not as high as it might need to be a true competitor in MMA. You know, whether that's they don't have the explosiveness or they don't have the coordination or the flexibility, there's something that's just going to make them not competitive. And normally those guys, I mean, sometimes they might not be the best SEALs, you know, but some of those guys are super smart. And so the reason that they're good SEALs is because they're just tactically sound, or they're really good leaders. They're never going to beat people on the range shooting because they're just not that coordinated. They don't have the hand-eye coordination. But they're good SEALs anyways. But when you put them in a purely physical competition like MMA, I shouldn't say a more physical competition like MMA, they're not going to do well. And of course, obviously, there's a skill set, right? MMA fighters train MMA all the time. That's what they do. They train jiu-jitsu and boxing and wrestling and Muay Thai and judo. That's what they do. And SEALs also train all the time, but guess what? When you're in a SEAL team, you're not just training just fighting, right? You're training shooting, and you're training tactics, and you're training patrolling and land navigation and parachuting and combat diving and fast roping and rappelling and waterborne operations, all this stuff. And then on top of all that stuff, which is the stuff that you actually really need to train, then they put on a level of mixed martial arts training to make sure that if you are, for whatever reason, without a weapon, or if you need to handle somebody that doesn't have a weapon, and so therefore you might not be in the right to just shoot them and kill them, you got to be able to handle yourself. So there's some level of MMA training, some fundamental jiu-jitsu skills, some fundamental striking skills, some fundamental wrestling skills that SEALs get, but it's not at the level of what a real MMA fighter is going to have. Mm-hmm. So with all that, I think there's a good percentage of MMA fighters that would make it through SEAL training and be good SEALs. And there's a good number of SEALs that would probably make really good, solid MMA fighters if they chose to do that and focus their lives on it, because there are some common traits with both of them. Both of them take hard work. Both of them take some level of physical suffering, right? The grind. I mean, you've been around when we're running MMA camps for people. It's a grind.
Yeah.
It's a grind. It's a day in, day out grind. Now, there's some luxury to that grind.
Mm-hmm.
There's some luxury to that grind, because when you're in an MMA camp, yeah, you worked hard as hell from 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock doing your strength and conditioning. But then you're going to go home and you're going to get a massage, and you're going to have some really good food standing by, and you're going to sit down, you're going to relax, and then at 11 o'clock you're going to go back to the gym, and now you're going to do your grappling training, and you're going to train really hard for an hour, maybe an hour and a half. You're going to do drills, you're going to get worn out again, and then you're going to go eat some lunch, you're going to relax, you're going to go back home, you're going to lay down, maybe take a little ice bath and a little jacuzzi. So there's some luxury to the MMA. In the SEAL teams, there's not. It's not happening. You're just getting ground down. And when you're going through the basic training, and when you're going through, the advanced workup training, you're just getting beat down all the time. It's a grind. But both of them are a grind. And that's why I think the work ethic that comes with a really good SEAL or a really good MMA fighter, there's a very strong similarity there. And the ability to take that grind is what I think that intrinsic discipline is what would make the crossover occur. So that would make a SEAL into a good MMA fighter, or an MMA fighter into a good SEAL or a good special operations guy.
Yeah. And there's, the crossover, it's ultimately, just like you said, it's kind of hard to identify it overall. It's real general. Because like an MMA fighter is training, sure, he's training to be a better MMA fighter in general, but mainly he's training for an event. So he knows, okay, it's going to be this many rounds. It's going to be this long per round. I'm going to get this much rest for this round. And I'm training to win that.
Yep.
Real specific. So the training is, if it's good training, it's going to best train him to function in that event, given the parameters. Yeah.
Combat.
Maybe still not like that. You're straight up training.
And a great example of this is Tim Kennedy, right? Tim Kennedy's a Green Beret Special Forces guy, and he's a complete beast, and he's a great example of a guy that has the commitment, the discipline, the dedication to be a Special Forces guy, and that translates right into how he works out and trains for fights. I mean, that guy trains like a madman for fights. Yeah. And I think that's a great example of somebody not only can do one or the other, he does both.
Yep.
Real time. He's in it. He's fighting November 15th, right, against Rashad Evans. So good on him.